Let's start building our first PHP package. And for this, we are going to use our package skeleton PHP. The package that we are going to build is going to be very simple, because I don't want to concentrate on the logic very much, but more on the package creation process. What we will be packaging up is this conversion. We are going to convert kilograms to pounds. To get started, we must first create a repository in which we can develop our package. And you can easily create a new repository that has the contents of our skeleton by pushing this button, Use this template. Here you should select the owner of the package, and I'm going to select Spatie. And I'm going to name my repository Weight Conversions. I can give a description here. Let's go for something simple, weight conversions in PHP. And let's keep it private for now. Let's create a repository from this template. And now GitHub is doing its magic. And here's our new repository. Let's clone this repository locally. So git clone Spatie weight conversions. If this short form doesn't work for you, try cloning using the full URL. And let's open this one up in PHP Storm. There we have it. And let's go over all the files that are included with the skeleton. First, we have a .github directory, and it contains some files that will configure how this repository will be used on GitHub. We have an issue template directory here, which defines what should happen when a user creates a new issue. We have a workflows directory, and these contain configuration on how GitHub should run the tests of this package and how it should fix code style issues. We'll have a few dedicated videos on these. The contributing file describes how people working on this code should interact with each other. Summarized, this file says to just be friendly and respect each other. And in my experience, this file is only needed for a small set of people, as most people are very enjoyable to work with. Let's go over the funding file. GitHub has a sponsorships program. In the UI, GitHub shows a little button to the sponsorship profile of the creator of the repository. Right now, this file just contains a placeholder, but this will be replaced by a real name when we run our configuration script. We'll do that later in this video. Next, we have a security file, and this file contains the content that will be displayed in the security tab at GitHub. Right now, we also have a placeholder here, which will be replaced. For security issues at Spatie, we ask our users to contact us directly, so we have time to fix it. All other issues should just be reported on the issue tracker or a discussion. Next up, we have the source directory, and in this directory, the code of our package will live. Right now, we have a simple placeholder class here. Next up, we have our testing directory, and by default at Spatie, we use pest. But don't worry if you use PHP unit. I'll create a separate video on how you can convert this to PHP unit. It only takes about a minute. The example test here contains a very simple test. And this is just to prove in a minute that everything is working correctly. And we have a pest configuration file, which is currently empty. If you want to know more about pest, head over to the pest homepage. You'll find that writing tests for pest isn't that different from PHP unit. Next up, the editor config file. Using this file, you can quickly configure the editor. Here we are saying that the default indentation space is 4, that the end of line character is this one, and that we should insert a new line for every file by default. And let me prove to you that this is working. I can remove this line, save the file, and then you see that the new line is back again. The nice thing of having an editor config file in the package is that contributors of your code will have their editors automatically configured, and this is of course great for consistency. There are many rules that you can put in an editor config file. If you want to know more, head over to the website of editor config. You'll find it linked below this video. Next up, we have Git attributes. You can do some neat things with a git attributes file, but where we use it the most for is for this directive, export ignore. This directive will omit certain files when our package gets required in a project. When our package gets required in a project, probably you don't need the testing directory or any of these files. These files are related to the development of the package and you don't need them in your project. And I think it's nice that the users of our package don't get any files that they don't need. Okay, next up, the git ignore file. You probably know this one. These are files that we don't want to commit in our repository. Next up, we have the configuration file of the code styler fixer. I'm going to create a separate video on this too. What the code styling fixer will basically do is to format your code to PSR12, which is a standard formatting in the PHP world. And you can also add some rules of your own. Using a code style fixer will make your code more consistent, which is always a good thing. Next up, the changelog file. In this file, we will document any changes that have been made to the package. Whenever we are going to create a new version of our package, we are going to describe the changes here. All bug fixes and new features will be documented. By default, we'll use Samware, but I'll also talk about that in a later video. Next up, composer.json. You'll find that composer.json for a package isn't that different from a composer.json in a project. First, we will have the name of our package here, and these ones will get replaced in a minute. A description and some keywords that will be used on Packagist. And in case you don't know, Packagist is the main repository where all packages are registered. You can specify any requirements of your package here. And at the time of recording, I'm using PHP 8 as a requirement. Usually, I always use the latest and greatest version of PHP because that allows me to use the latest features in my code. Next up, we have the development requirements of this package. And you can see that we use our pest test runner here and the code style fixer tool to fix code styling issues locally if you want that. And here we have our autoloaders. So we are going to configure that Composer should look for this namespace in this directory. And these will be updated by the configure script in a minute as well. We have some scripts here to easily run some tasks in our package. So if you want to format the code using our CS fixer, we can just run composer format and we don't need to type out this full command. And that are basically the most important options here. So like I've said, it's not that different from a composer JSON file in your project. Next up, we have that configure file here, and it contains a PHP script that will replace all the placeholders. We're going to execute it later. Let's first run over the remaining files here. Here is the license file. And we use the MIT license by default. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but the MIT license basically says that everybody may copy and modify this code as long as this copyright notice remains in place. So you still get credits for it. This license also says that you as a creator are not responsible for what this code does at all. It's one of the most used license type in open source software. There are a couple of others as well, so be sure to check those out too. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but I think that if you forget to put in a license, that legally speaking, nobody is allowed to use your code. So always use a license. Next up, we have the PHP unit config file. You might think this is a little bit confusing. Why do we have a PHP unit file as we're using pest? Well, pest uses PHP unit under the hood. And you can still use PHP unit's default configuration file to configure your tests. And finally, we have the README here. It starts off with some images, and these images are badges which quickly show you some basic information about the package. If I head back to GitHub, then you'll see them here. They are all red right now because we haven't configured it yet. When we configured it, then the first one will show you the latest version on Packagist. This one will show you if the tests have all returned green, if the code styling is correct, and how many times this package was downloaded. Let's go back to PHP Storm. Here we have some instructions how to use the template. We're doing that right now, so I can safely remove this. There's a section here which can be deleted as well. This section basically describes how you can support spaCy when you're using one of our packages. But since you're probably not working at spaCy, you can delete this. Next up, we have steps on how to install the package via Composer. Then we usually explain how to use this package. Next up, we say how to test this package. And here we're using that little Composer script. So Composer test, it runs this one. So people don't even have to know that we are using pest. Next up, we put a link to the changelog, a link to those contributing rules, a link to the security policy screen at GitHub. And that screen will display the content we have in security.md. We list who created this package, and finally a link to the license. And that are basically all the files in this package. Now you've seen a lot of places where we have these placeholders. Let's fill them out now by executing our configure script. So let's open up an editor here. I've made an edit in the README file. Let's commit that first. And I have a little alias for committing. This allows me to just type commit. And if I don't specify any commit message, then whip will be used, which some people consider as evil, but I think it's okay. So commit remove sponsors block. And I also have another alias that allows me to quickly push things to GitHub, GPO, which stands for Git Push Origin. So let's push this to GitHub. And let's now run the configuration script. You can do this with php configure.php. It asks for my name, and I'm going to give it my full name here. My email is indeed freek@spacy.be. Feel free to send me a little email to say that you're watching this video. And also, after you've seen the entire course, feel free to send me a mail to share your thoughts on it. So next, my username on GitHub, Freek Murze. The vendor name is spaCy, as I'm creating a spaCy package here. Then the vendor namespace is spaCy, but with a capital. The package name will indeed be weight conversions. The class name will also be weight conversions. Then the description weight conversions in PHP, like that. And then we should confirm this. Yes, these changes are correct. It'll ask to run Composer install for you and run the tests. And like in Mission Impossible, the configure script can delete itself. And if we do a git status now, then you can see that most of these files have been changed. So if I head over to the README here, then you see that all these placeholders are filled in now. Let's try to run the tests. So Composer test. And you can see that our little test passed. Let's commit these changes. Initial package configuration. Of course, you can do any commit message that you'd like. Let's push it up. And now everything should be at GitHub. Let's refresh this page. And sure enough, our commits are there. Something that I also like to do is do some configuration here. For most packages, you don't need the packages section. So that's this section. This is used for GitHub's internal package system, but we are going to use packagist.org. And we also don't need environments here. You can put up your website here. I'm going to use spaCy's open source page. And let's add some topics here. PHP, conversions, weight. You can put here anything that you want. This is just for letting people find your package more easily. And here you can see that information. And now this repository is almost ready to start creating our first package. In the next video, we are going to configure it a little bit more and start developing the real functionality that will be offered by this package. See you there.